Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Monday, March 28th. We begin tonight's cast at the Vatican, where Pope Francis repeated the words truth, justice, and healing in meetings with Metis and Inuit representatives. 85-year-old Angie Krirar was one of 3 residential school survivors who shared their experiences with Pope Francis. She says it felt truly amazing to speak with the Pope, and he seemed kind and receptive. The Inuit representative present, Natan Obed, said the meeting included positive conversations about the role the church could play in the future. Back at home, the federal government is entering into its final negotiations on purchasing 88 F-35 fighter jets from Lockheed Martin. Stephen Harper's Conservative government committed to buying 65 F-35s without a competition in 2010. This was before concerns about costs and capabilities forced it back to the drawing board. However, the government still has the option to begin talks with Saab about its fighter jet if negotiations with Lockheed Martin stall. In Ontario, Premier Doug Ford and the Prime Minister have officially announced a deal that will see parents of children aged 5 and under in childcare start getting rebates in May. Ontario is the last jurisdiction to sign on to Ottawa's plan to bring childcare fees down to an average of $10 a day by the end of 2026. The $10.2 billion deal includes rebates retroactive to April 1st as part of a fee reduction of up to 25%. Parents will see a further cost reduction in December. Staying in Ontario now, as Elections Canada is apologizing to voters in 3 First Nations in the province. They were denied their right to vote in last September's election because of breakdowns in communications. An inquiry determined some local polling stations in Cat Lake, Poplar Hill, and Pikangikum were closed on Election Day. This was after the local returning officer replaced them with a 1-day advance poll to avoid a conflict with hunting and cultural activities. Elections Canada says it needs to review how it plans for elections in First Nations communities. All right, well, in the nation's capital, an Ontario politician has surrendered to Ottawa police and is expected to appear in court today on 9 charges related to the convoy protest. Independent MPP Randy Hillier was arrested this morning and is charged with 2 counts of obstructing or resisting a public officer, 1 count of assaulting a peace or public officer, and 3 counts of counseling an uncommitted indictable office. MPPs recently voted to condemn his statements about the protest and COVID-19 restrictions. More than 70 Canadian gymnasts want Sports Canada to launch an investigation into what they say is a toxic culture and abusive practices in their sport. Their letter to Director General Vicky Walker states that they can no longer sit in silence and are coming forward with their experiences of abuse, neglect, and discrimination in hopes of forcing change. The athletes are calling for an independent investigation, saying complaints to Gymnastics Canada haven't been heard. Tragedy in Brampton, Ontario. 5 people have died in a fire that ripped through a home in the city Monday morning. Brampton Fire Chief Bill Boyes says firefighters arrived at the home around 2 a.m. Chief Boyes says the victims are 3 children and 2 adults. Another adult has been taken to hospital in critical condition, while 2 other adults were able to escape the blaze. Moving to an Alberta study published in today's edition of the Canadian Medical Association Journal. It shows the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic saw fewer stroke patients, but a higher number of stroke-related deaths. The research was led by neurologist Dr. Aravind Ganesh at the University of Calgary, who says he and others started noticing fewer people with strokes coming to hospitals. He says they decided to study it because they worried it fit with a trend in other countries of people not seeking emergency care during the pandemic. They found a decline both in the number of people presenting with strokes and those getting stroke treatment. Well, if you're a fan of oysters, listen up. Some oysters are being recalled due to possible contamination with norovirus. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says the recall affects Pacific Rim Shellfish Corporation brand oysters, which originated in British Columbia and have harvest dates of March 9th, 15th, and 19th. The oysters were sold in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Yukon, and Ontario, and possibly elsewhere as well. It was a sweet victory for Canadian soccer fans on Sunday. Canada's men's soccer team clinched a berth in the 2022 World Cup after a 4-0 win over Jamaica at Toronto's BMO Field. It's just the second time that Canada's men's soccer team has reached the World Cup in its history, the first time being in 1986. Forum Daily will be right back after the break, and when we return, we'll speak with a refugee from Ukraine who escaped the country with her family. So stay with us. We'll be right back shortly on Forum Daily. It's been just over a month since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, yet almost a quarter of the country's population has been displaced. According to the UNHCR, 3.87 million people have left for neighboring countries, while 6.5 million are believed to be displaced within Ukraine. And that journey to safety is a long one. In many cases, families have to split due to martial law, which requires men aged 18 to 60 to stay in Ukraine. This has led to over half of Ukraine's children to be displaced, along with their mothers who had to say goodbye to their husbands and older sons. Joining us now to share her own journey from a Kyiv war zone hotspot near Vyselkiv is N, a mother who fled to safety with her 2 children and her own mother. And welcome to Forum Daily, and thank you so much for sharing your story with our viewers.
Hi.
Now, and from my most recent updates from Ukraine Now volunteers, we know that you and your family are now safe in Germany with relatives. Can you walk us through how you were able to make it from this war zone in Kyiv to Germany?
Our journey took for 1 week from Kyiv to Germany. We didn't want to go anywhere. We just want to sit at home. But I watched news in the evening time and saw that 18 months baby boy was killed. And then I realized that I should save my kids, my mom, and we just sit on next train next day and go to Lviv. After that, we are standing in a line with a lot of people for 8 hours to sit to a train to Poland. And then when we sit, it was filled out of people. We are just laid on the floor. We sleep there. And usually this road should be, I think, 2.5 hours. But we went, I think, 22 hours. It was very hard way for us. After our arriving to Przemysl, Ukrainian Now volunteers helped for us and found some room in Catholic monastery. We have rest there, have some food, and then we have a train to Berlin and next train to the south of Germany. Now we are in safe place.
Well, we're glad to hear that you're safe. And now this path to safety was a dangerous one in of itself. You had to avoid active bombings and Russian attacks. So what did you see and experience along this journey?
When we were outside of Kyiv, it's near Vasilkiv, we see how bombs were exploded. And we heard it, and we hear a lot of sounds of explosions, fire, and that was really scary when we went by train on the way to Lviv. Very scared, was very scared to die in a train.
Sounds like a terrifying journey, and well, we are glad that you're safe, but we did mention that you had to leave your husbands behind on this journey. So can you take us back to that moment that you had to say goodbye?
Yes, I cried all the day that we decided to divide it, and it was most heartbreaking decisions that I should do, and my mom the same. Now half of my part lives in Ukraine, and I think we are met each other soon.
And on top of all of this, you have 2 young children, and you have an 11-year-old and a 10-year-old. Did they fully understand the situation that they were in Kyiv, that this was a war?
Yes, they heard bombing, so sirens, and now when they are talking to their dad every day, sometimes they're crying. And now I found for them online school, They take some lessons and a little bit busy, so I'm not crying, not too much time for this.
All right, and just a quick 45 seconds here until we have to stop for a quick break, but you are applying for visas to come to Canada with the help of Ukraine Now volunteers. How has that process been for you so far?
We're really grateful for Canadian government for quick response for Ukrainian people, and it was really hard to apply this visa for me. It took almost all day to fill out this form with help of volunteers, and almost 3 days. I tried to find some time for appointment to biometric interview, and I wish it was simplified. Because it would be impossible for someone maybe older or I don't know, somebody who is not helping someone.
Mhm. All right, and we're going to have to stop for a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Before the break, we were speaking with N, a Ukrainian mother of two who fled the Kyiv war zone with her two children and her own mother, leaving both husbands behind due to martial law. All right, and now before the Russian invasion, what did you and your husband do in terms of your livelihoods in Kyiv?
We are both have a yoga school. We are both yoga instructors. My husband teach yoga instructors more than 30 years, and me teaching yoga for women maybe 15 years already. That's our job.
And what were you and your family doing during the initial Russian attack on Kyiv? Can you take us back to that moment of realization that your home is under attack?
Yes, it was early morning in the 5 o'clock. We heard sirens and then was sound of some explosion. Our children sitting under the tables, they was very scared. We just realized that we should do something. My sister called me and we decided to move outside of Kyiv, but our house outside of Kyiv is near Vasilkiv. It's not safe place, how we think.
And I'm sure in that situation, it's hard to think about what to take with you as you're fleeing for safety. So what did you have to leave behind and say goodbye to when you and your family fled?
Um, of course, it was really hard to leave all our lives. We leave all our hobbies, leave love people. We leave our husbands with my mom and a lot of friends and our cats, our houses. I think all our life left there.
As you're saying, your entire life is left back at home in Kyiv, but we do know you're applying for visas to enter Canada. Something interesting that you mentioned is that you intend to return to Kyiv when it's safe, even though there might not be much to return to. So why return to Ukraine and when you have access to Canada or the United States?
As soon as possible, we would like to back to we can recovery, rebuilding our country because this is our home. We would like to back, and because of our husbands and family reunion, it's very important to live in Ukraine for us.
And have any of the other families that you may have met on your journey to Germany or to safety shared that sentiment that they want to return to Ukraine even if they have access to the United States or Canada?
Yes, all our friends who now lived in Germany, all who wants to go somewhere, they all want to be at home. Just see the train, sit and went. Because our home is in Ukraine.
All right, and well, if there is a message that you would want to share with our Canadian viewers when it comes to this refugee crisis, what would it be?
We would like to sharing, thank you for sharing your houses, your kindness, and it's really counts for us a lot. Thank you.
All right, and thank you again for joining us today and sharing your story with our viewers. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, Ukraine may not be getting the kind of military equipment it wants yet, as it tries to blunt a Russian invasion, but it is drawing on a new type of weapon. It has obtained millions of dollars to finance its war effort through cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Back in February, Ukrainian officials began tweeting out calls for electronic donations with a goal of getting $200 million in contributions. So far, the Kyiv government has taken in nearly $67 million of that goal as of this past weekend and has spent just over half what it has taken in. An Indigenous Canadian Armed Forces veteran from New Brunswick is back home. This comes after he was injured in an attack on a Ukrainian military base 2 weeks ago. 24-year-old Hunter Francis of the Eel Ground First Nation is recovering from minor injuries to his nose, right hand, and right eardrum. He says that since his return, he has been fundraising and gathering medical supplies for the people of Lviv. Coming up after the break, more news from around the world. Ukraine's president offers neutrality for peace as Russia's invasion continues. The G7 rejects Russia's demand to pay for natural gas exports in rubles. The White House states that the U.S. does not have a regime change policy for Russia, and the Taliban continues to slash women's rights in Afghanistan. We'll have these stories and more when we return, so stay tuned. We'll be right back here on Forum Daily News. Germany's energy minister says the group of 7 major economies have agreed to reject Moscow's demand to pay for Russian natural gas exports in rubles. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced last week that Russia will demand that unfriendly countries, which include Canada, pay for natural gas only in rubles from now on. Economists said the move appeared designed to try to support the Russian currency, which has plunged following the invasion of Ukraine. All right, well, meanwhile, White House officials are making it clear that the U.S. doesn't have a policy of regime change. This comes after President Joe Biden told reporters that Russian President Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power. President Biden's comment has sparked a real concern that it could undermine diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Mr. Biden has since responded to this concern, stating that he makes no apologies for calling for Mr. Putin's removal, while saying he was expressing his moral outrage, not new policy. French President Emmanuel Macron says Mr. Biden must not escalate the situation. All right, turning to the Middle East, where a Russian delegation has landed in Istanbul, Turkey, ahead of talks tomorrow and Wednesday with Ukrainian negotiators. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine could declare neutrality, potentially accept a compromise on contested areas in the country's east, and offer security guarantees to Russia to secure peace without delay. All right, well, this comes as the UN Refugee Agency is now estimating 3.87 million people have fled the war in Ukraine through Sunday. But it says that in the previous 24 hours, only 45,000 crossed into other countries, which is the slowest one-day count yet. It's not clear if the exodus is easing. The International Organization for Migration estimates about 6.5 million people remain displaced inside the country, and that another 12 million may be trapped in places where fighting has been intense or don't want to leave. Crude oil prices are at their highest in years, and a recent move by the United Arab Emirates' energy minister to double down on an oil alliance with Russia may only be making things worse. This comes as Moscow's war on Ukraine rattles markets and sends energy and commodity prices soaring. The minister said Russia is an important member of the OPEC Plus alliance and that its 10 million barrels of oil a day are needed. He shot down suggestions the UAE would increase production unilaterally. The United States, Europe, Japan, and others have been calling on Gulf Arab oil producers to do more to help bring down prices. Staying in the Middle East, as the Taliban has issued several repressive edicts over the past few days, banning girls from going to school beyond the 6th grade and barring women from boarding planes unless accompanied by a male relative. Men and women can only visit public parks on separate days, and the use of mobile telephones in universities is prohibited. International media broadcasts, including the Pashto and Persian BBC services, and even foreign drama series were taken off the air over the weekend. Well, trouble is also brewing in South America, where a report says Venezuelan soldiers conducted joint operations with Colombian rebels in the state of Apure earlier this year. The report from Human Rights Watch was released on Monday as violence increased along a remote and often lawless stretch of the Colombia-Venezuela border. The report says that in January, a truce ended between the National Liberation Army and another rebel organization known as the Joint Eastern Command. This led to clashes, abductions, and assassinations of civilians that forced thousands to leave their homes in Venezuela and Colombia. All right, moving to India now, where millions of workers have begun a two-day strike across the country. Labor unions want the government to provide universal social security coverage for workers in unorganized sectors, hike the minimum wage under an employment guarantee program, and stop the privatization of public sector banks. The strikers are also demanding the government halt its plans to sell state assets. Organizers say more than 200 million workers are expected to join the strike. A slap seen and heard around the world provided plenty of drama at the Oscars. The feel-good deaf family drama Coda was named Best Picture, marking the first time the top award went to a streaming service. But most of the morning after buzz is about Will Smith striding up on stage and smacking Chris Rock for making a joke about his wife. Police say they are aware of the incident, but that the person involved had declined to file a police report. Meanwhile, Dune, a sci-fi film directed by Canadian Denis Villeneuve, won a total of 6 Oscars last night, all in technical categories. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, and be sure to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily News.